NBC10 breaking news.
Good afternoon. I'm NBC10's Erin Coleman. We're coming on the air this afternoon because Philadelphia city leaders are about to give us an update about the unrest and the demonstrations that have been going on all over the city. Here's Mayor Jim Kenney.
Black Philadelphians and black communities across the country are in pain. I've seen that in the faces and cries for justice for protesters. We've seen it in the tears of black business owners whose shops have been destroyed. We've seen it in the words of lifelong residents who want to see the change being demanded by demonstrators but are concerned about the path we will take to get there. All of these perspectives are valid. And while I can't possibly ever truly comprehend the pain of our black residents that are feeling, I want you to know that we see you and we hear you. What isn't acceptable is some of the acts we've seen transpire since yesterday. Last night, a group of people in Fishtown took it upon themselves to make a show of protecting their neighborhood. They picked up baseball bats and in turn exemplified the deep divides in our community. Their actions were antagonistic and made a bad situation worse. We do not condone vigilantism. We understand a community's desire to protect their neighborhood, and if they want to do that in peace, we would allow it, regardless of neighborhood. But armed vigilantism will not be tolerated moving forward. I'm glad the police eventually moved in to disperse the group, but I'm not happy about how long it took. We tolerated it last night for too long, and that was a mistake. We will not tolerate it moving forward. I'm also disturbed by reports that some of the officers on the scene were not only allowing these people to gather, but were seen high-fiving and taking photos with them. That is unacceptable, and I know the Commissioner shares that view. If you want to stand up for your neighborhood, if you want to help our police force, we welcome that, so long as you do so in a peaceful, non-threatening, and non-confrontational way. But going forward, any displays of vigilantism will not be tolerated, period. Overnight, we also got news of a business owner in South Philly who shot and killed a man that had been attempting to steal from his gun shop. While I understand and respect the rights of individuals to protect their property, I'm also deeply troubled at the ease with which another life has been taken amongst this chaos. We also saw at least one person killed following a string of attempts to use explosives to open an ATM throughout the city. And then this morning we got word that looting overnight led to a fatal injury of a 19-year-old student. These incidents are all stark reminders that none of this is a game. Looting has consequences. Futures are being lost and destroyed by this. Lives are being lost. A pair of sneakers or a video game are simply not worth your future. And I implore anyone contemplating such actions to consider not only your future, but the absolute heartbreak that this sort of tragedy will bring to your families. Of course, I also must recognize the action we took yesterday on I-676. Last night, Commissioner Outlaw and I released written statements that indicated tear gas and other use of force that took place on the highway was a last resort and a decision not taken lightly. We stand by that statement when it comes to deployment in response to a state trooper being surrounded in his vehicle. But we have since have been made aware there may have been other deployments of tear gas in addition to that event. All of these incidents will be investigated by Internal Affairs and reported on. The Commissioner can share more about the specifics, but what I'll say is that I'm deeply concerned by this development. And before I turn things over to Commissioner Outlaw, I do want to address another important topic and time-sensitive topic, which is today's election, believe it or not, in the midst of all this. I want to reiterate that Philadelphians who still need to get to the polls to cast their vote will be able to do so freely. Polling places will remain open until 8 p.m., and we will make sure that anyone traveling home does not need to be concerned about issues with the 8:30 p.m. curfew. This holds true for both voters and election workers. You should not be afraid to go to the polls or drop your mail-in ballot today. Drop off your mail-in ballot today. There's nothing more sacred than the right to vote, and we vow to protect that right. I also want to remind people that with the governor's executive order, if a voter's mail-in or absentee ballot is postmarked today, it will still be accepted if received by the Board of Elections by June 9th. Prior to this, they had to physically be received by today. I know that in the wake of this unrest and the tragic events that preceded it, we can begin to move forward together. We will only be able to get through this and make real change if we are united in doing so. So let's continue to keep each other safe while supporting each other through our grief. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Yesterday's protests continued in the Center City area, along with numerous incidents of looting, vandalism, and arson throughout the city. It bears reiterating that the criminal acts are wholly unrelated to any noble cause or exercise of First Amendment rights. Very shortly, I'll provide an update on current conditions along with what we expect moving forward. But first, again, as I said yesterday, I express my profound appreciation to all of our law enforcement officers, our assisting law enforcement partners, and our dedicated community and faith-based partners for their continued professionalism and commitment to restoring order and promoting peace. With that said, there are two incidents that I would like to specifically address. First, yesterday, shortly after 5 p.m., our SWAT officers deployed tear gas in the direction of a crowd of persons who had breached the fencing and entered the I-676 expressway. The crowd surrounded a state police trooper who was seated in his vehicle and threw rocks on responding officers from elevated positions. After numerous warnings, SWAT officers deployed beanbags, OC pellets, and OC spray. Afterward, the SWAT officers simultaneously deployed non-chemical white smoke and tear gas. This application of force ensued over the course of approximately 10 minutes. Subsequently, numerous arrests were made without further incident. The option of deploying tear gas was selected when it became evident at that time other options were not effective. As I have repeatedly said, we will fully uphold everyone's right to peacefully assemble and protest. And we cannot tolerate acts of violence and other criminal activity. That said, as is the case for all applications of force, this incident, along with other incidents that have recently been brought to my attention, will be fully investigated by the Internal Affairs with diligence. I will not allow the actions of some individuals within this organization to undermine the efforts that we are trying to make as an organization moving forward during this time. Secondly, last night, two opposing groups assembled in front of 26th District headquarters. As best as we can determine, one group, some of whom were armed with bats, was ostensibly there to protect the police station. The other group opposed that group's presence. Police took measures to keep the two groups separated on either side of the street. However, sometime during the evening, members of the two groups physically clashed, and we have at least one report of an assault. Our understanding is that the physical altercation occurred after the groups departed from the 26th District. To be clear, we do not condone any acts of violence, and as an agency, we don't take sides. Our mission is to always protect all persons personally. I'd also like to discuss the general issue of private citizens protecting their property. While every person has the right to defend themselves and protect their property, we do not endorse or condone any form of vigilante justice or taking the law into one's own hands. And we strongly encourage that if there is a safe, nonviolent way to protect oneself and property, that option should be selected. With regard to arrests and injuries to officers, currently 692 arrests have been made, and at least 25 officers have been injured. The arrest numbers will continue to grow as numerous persons await processing. Moving forward, looting teams have been assigned to each of the 6 geographic patrol divisions. By limiting each team's span of responsibility, we will be able to more quickly respond to looting as well as acts of vandalism and other types of disorder. In addition, because of the election, curfew hours will begin tonight at 8:30 p.m. Beginning at that time, curfew restrictions will be enforced throughout the city, and only those persons engaged in essential duties will be permitted outdoors. We will have additional information to provide later today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner. Congressman Brendan Boyle, and since I'm the federal official here, let me just address a couple of those items and defer any city questions, obviously, to the Mayor and the Commissioner. Two things. First, I think for any of us who are in elective office, whether federal, state, or local, it's incumbent upon us at any point, at any time, to, through our words and actions, do things that bring people together and not make situations worse. What the President of the United States said and did last night is wrong. It only inflames the situation, and then it affects people's lives and safety right here in our city, and indeed in every community across our land. So I again, and perhaps this is a little like Charlie Brown with the football, but I again urge the President to please refrain from pouring more gasoline onto this fire. It affects people's lives here in our community. Second, as it's scheduled right now, Congress is supposed to return into session, at least the House of Representatives, 4 weeks from today. That is no longer tenable. I urge congressional leaders to call us back into session sooner. A number of conversations that I've been having with congressional colleagues from all across the country clearly also support the idea of us returning to Washington to deal with this situation. Congress is a co-equal branch of government. Indeed, it is the first article of the Constitution that was written within walking distance of here. If there's going to be an absence of leadership from the White House, it's time for Congress to step up and put into place the sort of changes that we need to see in our society. So with that, I would again just urge people, whether elected officials or ordinary citizens, in a time like this, we all matter, and what we say matters. This is a time in which we need to come together. We are just ripping ourselves apart, and the whole world is watching. It's time for the American people to come together at long last. Thank you.
Questions?
Commissioner, why were those folks in Fishtown last night? Why weren't they arrested or taken off the street with bats and clubs after the curfew?
That's a very good question, and I'll have an answer for that. Not at this moment, at some point later today as we look more into how that unfolded.
How would you describe that group?
I would not describe that group as someone that I would want speaking for me or speaking on behalf of my police department. Again, I am not a proponent. We are not proponents of intimidation and fear for the purposes of being bullies. We had to bring the National Guard out here to fulfill an enforcement role. That's our jobs. That's what they're here to do. I didn't ask them to do that. And again, I don't welcome that. I don't invite them to come back, and we don't need them.
Commissioner, on 676, I have two questions about that. First, who made the call that tear gas was going to be used? Was that your call, a deputy? Who was the one that made that decision? And then there was, separately, there's video of the Philadelphia police officer pulling someone's mask down and spraying them in the face with pepper spray. Have you seen the video? What's your reaction?
Well, you might see that my demeanor is a little bit different right now today. I saw the video shortly before I walked out of here. The decisions to deploy gas are made by the incident commander that they're on scene. I'm not going to say names at this point. It's all unfolding. It would be fully investigated. They were there on the ground at that time. Whether or not there was clear or proper supervision during that incident will be handled as well. When I say it's fully investigated, we look at everything from the deployment itself, everything that led up to it, and everything after that. So, again, I'm not going to go into detail about that. But as I said, the actions of individuals will not undermine what we are attempting to accomplish as an organization. It's not helpful, and it's not for political reasons. It's not because of the current climate. It's because this is very real. And I don't need distractions internally to take away from what we're trying to accomplish as well.
If the purpose of the 676 incident was to get them off the highway, why was tear gas tossed at them as they were fleeing up that hill? The video is pretty clear that people were fleeing up, getting off the highway, yet police continued to throw tear gas and the rubber bullets.
Well, when we deploy tear gas, it's for a purpose. It's to disperse, but then also to make arrests after. There's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration when folks run up on a freeway. At that point, it's not deemed peaceful. There's moving vehicles. They can get hurt. People in the vehicles can get hurt. And then you have people that we don't have control over that might take action upon themselves because they're frustrated against the protesters. That is not an ideal situation. I've heard all the time, well, why don't you just let them roam free, shut down the freeway, and just let them take the freeway? You have to make decisions as it occurs. Again, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback, but I can tell you that it's very clear guidelines around our use of force policy, what is required, and things change. Again, I'm not going to go too far into detail because we have to look further into this and have a very proper and thorough administrative investigation. I will also say that video is a great tool, but we still don't know what happened before and after that and what other avenues of egress were available aside from that hill at that time.
But is that an appropriate tactic?
And I don't know if the mayor wants to speak to this too, but does there seem to be some sort of organized effort here that's separate from the protesters? That there's protesters and then there's some sort of organized effort. I've seen people on social media, on some sort of platform. I don't know who can speak to that.
There's organized efforts not just to instigate and agitate those who are peacefully protesting, absolutely, and we see those individuals bringing caustic agents, what we believe to be caustic agents, Molotov cocktails and other things to disperse themselves amongst peaceful demonstrators, so we're not as easily able to discern who's responsible. And we're also seeing organization on the other side on the looting piece as well. Did you want to cover that?
I mean, we monitored the entire march of looked like between 3,000 to 5,000 people who snaked its way through the entire city. There was no violence. There was no intimidation. The police went along with them on bicycle and on foot. And it was a peaceful, legal protest. And there was no issue for it. At some point in time, a group broke off from the main group and decided to take the highway, which, as the commissioner said, is a dangerous situation. You have people stopped in traffic who may be frustrated, who may be angry, who may be scared, to try to get out of that situation and wind up running somebody over. Second issue is the one that she talked about also, was that, you know, we have officers that have been hurt with super soakers filled with bleach, squirted in their eyes, bricks being thrown through police car windows where the glass shattered and embedded in an officer's eye. We've had caustic solutions thrown at officers to burn their hands and arms. Now, look, I'm not saying that that's tit for tat. All I'm saying is, in order for us to get this group somewhere else other than where they were, that was employed and they moved. I don't, listen to me, I hate this entire thing. I wish none of this ever started. And we're stuck with the issue with every day something happens that we may not be prepared for. And if you see some of the tactics, you'll have a main group of protesters doing a legitimate protesting, and then you have a group that breaks off, so us particular can follow them, diminishing the number of police that are available. So you have to, it's a flowing situation that people react to based on what's happening at the time.
Mayor, you've got to sign off on the use of gas.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
In the end,
yeah, it was a last resort. It was a last resort. And the other issue is, how do you clear people off the highway? I mean, do you use force, physical force? Do you wade in with batons? No, that's not good either.
So what is the other event that you're talking about related to the use of gas that has you upset, that you think Internal Affairs ought to look at? The videotape?
No, we're talking about the pepper spray.
Yeah.
The pepper spray. That's totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
Mayor,
what we saw.
The South Philly gun shop owner was from your comments, it sounds like the South Philly gun shop owner was unjustified.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said I don't know all the details, but I'm saying it's another life lost. It's another life lost in the midst of all of this, and that's sad, no matter what the situation is.
And it seems like, I don't know if the commissioner can speak to this, but there was tear gas also being thrown from the protesters down, correct? No, I'm just saying, because you were talking about pepper spray or something being thrown at the, like, as well as with this organized group. So
I mean, it's chaotic. It's chaotic, and it's happening in real time. And to analyze a videotape the next day is easier situation because you're not standing in the highway in the midst of that chaos. And I will tell you that during the course of these last few days, and I've watched clearly on camera, officers standing there being spit on, being punched, having objects thrown at them, and no one has reacted. No one has reacted in a negative way back. And that takes a lot of restraint. Yesterday was more chaotic and more dangerous, and that's why we wound up where we were.
Fishtown, there were these vigilante groups who were allowed to stay out past curfew
Right.
without the police arresting them. There have been many Philadelphians arrested in Kensington and West Philadelphia. Why the disparity in those two approaches?
I don't know, but we're going to find out.
Mr. Outlaw, can you talk about the rights of homeowners and business owners to protect their property? I mean, can you talk about and get that out there, what their rights are?
Absolutely. And, you know, like I said before, I would certainly hope that these things can be resolved in the least violent way possible, but homeowners do and business owners do have the right to protect themselves or their proproperty.
Can you talk about that?
Jeff, you have a question?
But, thank you. But
You're
does that-
welcome. You owe me one now.
Does that, I can't answer it. Does that include?
Sure you can.
Does that include, when you say the right to protect their property, taking out an AR-15 that they rightfully and lawfully own, use it to protect their property, and shooting someone who comes onto it?
I'm not speaking preliminarily. There's still an investigation that needs to be that takes place, but there are laws that allow us to protect our property. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but again, I don't have the full. No one has all of the full circumstances around what happened. It's unfortunate all the way around. There are very clear gun laws. There are very clear laws that allow us to protect ourselves and our property from harm. And I'll leave it at that.
Triggers on? We heard that your officer said it last night. Has that been confirmed?
I can't confirm that.
Commissioner.
What's the communication like who, is it you and the state trooper, like a head state trooper kind of making these decisions, or is it just the state troopers? Like what's kind of the breakdown?
So there's an operational chief that's down on ground that is in communication with everyone that's there, with all the leadership that's down there, and there's coordinated efforts. It's communicated on the air what's happening, and then there's authorizations when there's requests made to deploy less lethal munitions as events unfold.
For the 676 incident, what evidence is there of the use of the throwing of the rocks? Because my understanding is that this initially started when protesters started throwing rocks at police, but is there body camera footage or what kind of evidence?
We're still
do you have that
gathering.
happened?
We're still gathering information and evidence.
76 right at Broad and Vine was very well fortified with state police assets. We saw the protests leave City Hall, and it looked like they made a left on race and wound up into the art museum area, where we understand they eventually breached the highway there. Is there going to be additional resources at that area? How did they make it on there, if you could?
That's a good question, and I had the same question myself. So as soon as I find out the answer, again, I said yesterday, we are a learning organization.
Just make sure one thing about the march.
Absolutely. But I want to say, again, when we're talking about on-ground tactics, when we know if there's a history of folks getting onto the freeway in the past, those are the areas that we would want to fortify in advance.
On normal experience with protest marches is that the folks will tell us what their route is, so we can make the route safe. This group refuses to tell us where they're going, so it's very difficult to maintain that balance of protection for them and protection for people who are not in the march to get where they're going to be. So, I mean, 9 out of 10 organizations will give us a route that they're going on, and we will then accommodate that route. But when you're continually changing direction, it creates havoc and chaos and unknown, and that's what makes it difficult to fairly and safely police an event like that, because we don't know the direction that they're going in.
Protesters we spoke with.
I was anecdotally, I was watching. It may have been like 2-3 groups that began to move. So you have a group of 3,000 to 5,000, and then you have 300 or 400 move off one direction, 300 to 400 move off another direction, and that's, I don't know what, it must be a strategy, but I assume they want us to follow them with other parts of our police department, which then thins everything out and makes it more difficult to control.
Some of the protesters we spoke with, though.
The ATM stuff, real quickly. Who's hitting the ATMs?
Criminals.
We're working.
Yes, people want money. Who's hitting the ATM?
We're working with the ATF, who's taken the lead on these investigations, to figure out exactly who is behind this. We believe that is organized efforts and coordinated efforts as well.
The protesters
That's
we
it.
spoke with,
That's all
said
we
they
can share.